Did you know that UV exposure is the #1 environmental factor accelerating your skin's aging? Yes, that means the fine lines, the wrinkles, the dark spots, the sagging, all the things. Yes, it is sun exposure, also known as UV radiation. I'm Dr. Ray. I'm a board certified dermatologist, and you may have noticed online recently on social media, on your Reddit feed, etc., a lot of talk about sunscreen and how it is toxic, how it causes cancer, and how nobody should use it, or you should use just a natural sunscreen, something of that nature. And you might have been tempted even to follow that advice, even though maybe at the back of your mind something's telling you doesn't seem quite right. But these people sound like they know what they're talking about. Maybe they're citing some scientific sounding studies. Maybe they sound sciencey themselves. Maybe they seem educated, and it seems like maybe there's something to this. If that's the case, I'm here to debunk all of that, because when we're looking at skin health and longevity and resilience, we have to look at skin science and what skin science tells us and what evidence tells us. And so what does the science tell us? The science tells us that UV radiation is both a carcinogen and an aging accelerator. This has been well proven, well documented, really no question about it. In fact, UV radiation is categorized as a category 1 carcinogen, meaning that it has been proven to cause cancer in humans, just like cigarette smoke, right? And when it comes to skin aging, which is what we're talking about in this video, again, it is not a question. We know that UV radiation increases what we call reactive oxygen species, or oxidative damage, that then damages the DNA in our skin and the collagen and elastin in our skin. And when you lose collagen and elastin, what happens? Your skin ages. And not only that, UV radiation increases the production of melanocytes and melanogenesis, which is the pigment in your skin. And not only does it cause a tan, but in turn it also causes increase in things like freckles and sunspots, which we call lentigines in the derm world, but also known as sunspots. And they're called sunspots for a reason, right? So there really is no question about that. Now, if the question is, should I use sunscreen? Should I not? Am I depriving myself of vitamin D and of the beneficial effects of the sun, which we are learning a bit more about recently these days, on how UV exposure can have beneficial effects on things like cardiovascular risk. But I will say, sunscreen does not necessarily negate those beneficial effects. Why? First of all, no sunscreen is 100% effective. There's no sunscreen that blocks all of the UV rays, right? The vast majority of sunscreens that we're using in the SPF 50 or so range block maybe like 98% of UV rays, which doesn't sound like there's a lot left that gets in, but the sun's rays are very strong. And so that couple of percentage points of UV radiation getting in is biologically significant. And you might have noticed that if you have ever been out for, let's say, 6 hours or so, and you are diligently reapplying your sunscreen every couple of hours, and you still get a tan, that is because your sunscreen is not fully effective and the sun is having that biologic effect on your skin. And so, of course, you will also be getting that vitamin D production, etc. And by the way, the amount of sun that you need to produce an adequate amount of vitamin D for your body is going to vary so much depending on a number of factors, including your skin tone, your overall health, where you are in the world, your geographic location, the time of year, the cloud cover, the ozone layer over where you are. So all of that factors in. And so the sun really is an unreliable way to get your vitamin D. And so I always recommend to my patients and clients that they get their vitamin D intake, their recommended daily allowance, via food intake or via supplementation if necessary, especially if someone is a vegan, because a lot of the dietary sources of vitamin D are not vegan, like egg yolks, fatty fish, like salmon, and dairy products and things like that. You might have heard this before, but I'm going to say it again. As a dermatologist living and working in Southern California, I see a lot of sun damage in my office. And I can tell you that most people, the vast majority, are underusing sunscreen, even when they are somewhat self-conscious about it. They're sun conscious, they know they should be using sunscreen, and they want to be good about it, quote unquote. But I find that the vast majority are underusing it. I will give you an example. So the vast majority of people that come into my clinic, every new patient, pretty much, I ask them about sun exposure and whether they wear sunscreen, etc. And the vast majority tell me I wear it if I'm going to be in the sun. And so when I ask them what that means, they say, okay, if I'm going to be out at Disneyland or I'm going to the beach or hiking, something like that, then I put it on. But just my day to day, I don't use it. Or sometimes they just use it on their face and nowhere else, and they just put it on in the morning, but they don't reapply. And so here's the thing that people are not thinking about when they're using sunscreen in that way, which is the compound effect. And what does that mean? That means if you have just 30 minutes outside, and that could be including in your car because UVA radiation does get through your screen and through your window in your car. So let's say you're at least 30 minutes out every day. I think probably most people, unless you're really a hermit, are out at least 30 minutes. Even if you work at home, you might be running to the store, walking the dog, or taking the kids to school, etc. So if you have at least 30 minutes a day, over a week, that is 3.5 hours of unprotected time. And then over the course of a year, that's a minimum of 182 hours, again, of unprotected time. And so that's what I mean by the compound effect. And over 10 years, 20 years, imagine how much time that is. And the fact is that cumulative sun exposure does matter. It does count. It does damage your skin. It does damage your DNA. It does increase your risk of skin cancer, and it does accelerate your skin aging. So all of that taken into account, that is why I recommend making sunscreen just your default. Make it your daily habit, and then you don't really have to think about it. And if you are looking outside to see what the weather is, to see if you need to put on your sunscreen, you are doing it wrong. Don't look outside. 99% of the time, the answer is going to be yes, you need to put on your sunscreen. And don't forget commonly forgotten areas like the sides of the neck, especially if you don't have long hair that you wear down like I do, sides of the neck, the ears, the back of the hands. Just think about how often you are driving like this, right? I happen to drive like this now because I don't want the sun on my hands, but think of how often you drive like this and you're just getting that sun beating down on the backs of your hands. And that is why we see a lot of skin cancer on the back of the hands, yes, and also a lot of aging signs like dark spots, what we call liver spots, which are actually nothing to do with the liver, showing up on the back of the hand. So those commonly forgotten areas, I would make that just part of your daily default application. Don't forget that you do need to reapply every 2 hours if you are going to be outside or going back outside. So let's say in the morning, driving to work, you put it on before work, amazing. You're at work until let's say 3-4 p.m. and then you're going to drive home, and you really should be putting it on again before you drive home. And I would say exception would be yes, if you have a short drive, like 20 minutes or less, and it's like winter time and it's nearing sunset at 4 p.m. Okay, I will give you a pass there. But in general, again, make it part of your daily routine to be reapplying after 2 hours, because after 2 hours, you just think of it as like you didn't even put it on, okay? And what SPF should you be using? I would say a minimum of a 30 would be your minimum SPF for your daily use. Aim more for a 45 or 50 if you're going to be out for a long time. So again, a day out at a theme park or a baseball game or something like that. That way you're going to get the most protection. We used to think that higher than a 30 really didn't get any significant benefit, but we do know now based on more recent studies that yes, an SPF 50 actually does provide 50% improved protection over an SPF 30, believe it or not. So that's why I say that. And the whole concept of a mineral versus a chemical sunscreen, you really can use either, whatever you prefer. The bottom line here is this: chemical sunscreen is not going to harm you internally. It is not going to cause hormone disruption or affect your organs or anything like that. I will get into why in a moment and where that thought came from. So you really can use a chemical sunscreen if you prefer that. My personal preference and what I recommend to people myself is using a mineral sunscreen because it's less irritating. It doesn't sting when it gets into the eyes. It's more stable when it's exposed to UV light, and it's more reef safe in general. Okay, so that is why I prefer mineral. I love a good tinted mineral sunscreen, especially on my face and on my neck, chest, hands, arms, etc. A non-tinted mineral sunscreen is what I go for, and that's what I recommend as well. But again, whichever sunscreen feels the best on your skin and that you're actually going to use is what I prefer for you. And let's get back to that tinted sunscreen. So why tinted sunscreen? Couple reasons. The tint does hide the white cast that sometimes the mineral sunscreens can have. And then second, the tint does provide an added layer of protection against visible light. And so visible light, the largest source of visible light in our world is the sun. And so yes, we want to protect it from that visible light, especially for skin tones that are kind of like olive tone, like my tone, or darker. We do know that visible light increases hyperpigmentation, so sunspots, dark spots, melasma in those skin types especially. And so if we can protect from that visible light with this tint that's in the sunscreen, then you're going to get an added layer of protection against hyperpigmentation. Now, inside lights like your phone screen, your laptop screen, the incandescent lights in the room, are those significant enough to age your skin or cause hyperpigmentation? And the answer really is no. They do not radiate enough visible light to affect your skin in that way. And so really we're talking about the sun when we're talking about protecting from visible light. Okay, you may have heard differently, but the science really just does not support that. And so really, again, we're talking about the sun here. And you don't need to worry about, having your phone screen in front of you and causing melasma from your phone screen. It's just not going to happen. Then back to the question around chemical sunscreen ingredients. So chemical sunscreen ingredients are anything except zinc oxide and titanium dioxide in the United States. Anything other than those is considered a chemical sunscreen ingredient. And so what is the issue with that? What's the big controversy? Many people are pointing to hormone disruption and liver and kidney toxicity and cancer when it comes to these chemical sunscreen ingredients. And what a lot of them are citing are these old studies. The fact that they're old is not a bad thing, but the fact that they are done on mice and rats, and that the mice and rats were actually fed these sunscreen ingredients in really, really high doses orally. And just to put it into perspective, as humans using sunscreen the way we do, we would need to use sunscreen on our entire body every single day for at least 100 years to get the same kind of dose that the rodents were getting in these studies. The rodents in those studies did have adverse health effects. But again, it was not a study done in humans, and the quantities, the sheer doses of the sunscreen ingredients that were fed to those mice and rats was just astronomical and not something that we will ever experience in the way that we use sunscreen as humans. And in fact, there has never been a documented case of sunscreen toxicity, which might tell you something, okay? And furthermore, every dermatologist, which by the way are the experts on skin, right? We are the experts on skin. We study skin science. We study skin for a living. We live, eat, and breathe skin health. Every dermatologist pretty much on the planet recommends sun protection, including the use of daily sunscreen. And we wouldn't be doing that if there was not something to it. And so when you are looking for recommendations or, information on this topic, I really, really encourage you to look to the scientific community, to the experts, which are the physicians that study skin science and treat skin on a daily basis. So hopefully that helps put some of those concerns at rest. And a couple other things that I've had people ask me about, which I think are really great to talk about here. One is, what if you wear makeup and you don't want to reapply your liquid sunscreen over makeup? I highly, highly recommend getting a powder sunscreen for that purpose and just keeping it with you in your bag, in your purse, wherever you are, and you can reuse that to reapply. I don't love it for the first application. The main reason it is just kind of hard to know how much you're getting on there. It is much easier to quantify with the liquid sunscreen how much you're getting on there. But with a powder, it's hard to know, am I getting enough of a layer on, etc. So reapplication is better than nothing. I definitely myself would not want to put a lotion sunscreen over makeup. Who wants to do that? But powder sunscreen is great for that. And just kind of get several passes if you can. Okay, there's no distinct quantity in terms of how much to put on. Just try to get a good layer on. And then what about sticks and sprays? So sticks, again, okay for reapplication, and I especially love it for little kids. Like, I put a stick in my 6-year-old son's backpack, and he easily can take that out, at recess or whatever, and put it on easily for himself. So it's great for kids, especially when they're applying themselves. Stick reapplication is fine. And again, the reason part of it too is you don't really know how much of a layer you're getting on. I tell people just go several passes, try to get a good layer on there. And really the problem with sticks too is there was one study that showed that in order to get the full SPF on the bottle or the stick, that you had to do something like 60 passes or something. No one is going to do that. But again, in my opinion, if it's stick or nothing, then do stick. If it's stick or lotion, then do lotion. Okay, so that's kind of an easy way to look at it. What about sprays? Same thing with sprays. It's a little bit harder to quantify in terms of how much you're getting on your skin. And are you getting a thick enough layer on? So again, probably like 2 or 3 passes, just a couple inches away from the skin. You don't want to be out here spraying where it's going to go all over. And if it's a windy day or you're outside and it's breezy, 90% of that is probably not getting on your skin. So you might want to put it on, where there's still air or inside. Rub it in. Yes, rub it in. Same with the stick. You want to rub it in. Great for reapplication. Or I also like it when someone does not have someone to help them put sunscreen on their back. I just saw a patient in clinic the other day who does swim every day, and that is her form of exercise, and that's amazing and wonderful. And she does apply sunscreen actually, but she had a swimsuit shaped internal cutout, like a diamond shaped sunburn on the back of her back because she wasn't able to get the sunscreen back there. So I suggested to her, get a spray sunscreen, spray it on there, like rub it in as well as you can. You probably won't be able to rub it all in, but it's better to just get the spray on there and, maybe let it sit for like 15 minutes before you go out to swim. And that's better than nothing. So that's where powders, sprays, and sticks come in. And one thing I didn't address too is the quantity. We were talking about quantities, right? How much lotion sunscreen should you really put on? So for this, I really like using the teaspoon rule. I think it's easy to remember and kind of eyeball. So the rule is 1 teaspoon for your face and neck, and you can include your ears in there, that's fine. And please don't get your teaspoon measure, just eyeball it. Okay, about a teaspoon, which is also about the length of 2 finger lengths of product. And that's enough for your face and neck. And then 1 teaspoon for each arm. Each arm gets 1 for your entire front of your torso, 1 for your entire back, and then each leg gets 2 teaspoons. Okay, so all that added up, just take my word for it, is 9 teaspoons, which is about 1 shot glass size. You may have heard that before. 1 shot glass is enough for your entire body, head to toe. So hopefully that was helpful. And if you have any questions on sunscreen, please, please, please drop them in the comments. I love answering these questions. If you have any concerns, health concerns around sunscreen, please drop those in there as well. And if you have not subscribed, please do. I so appreciate your subscribing when you watch. If you like this content, like this video if you found it helpful. If there's anything else you want to hear about, please again drop it in the comments. I love getting ideas from you guys. All right, thanks. That's all for now. Have a good day.